I'm Alan Robarge, a relationship coach. Welcome to Improve Your Relationships, where I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And on this video, let's talk about emotional isolation and the ongoing relationship that we have with feeling disconnected. And I'd like to start the video with the question, how are you? And to think about that in our life and to think about that question as it comes up and shows up with others and in our family and our history around being asked, how are you? Now, that question can have multiple meanings or definitions. It's often used as a greeting in our culture. You see someone that you don't know very well and you run into each other at the grocery store and you quickly blurt out, hey, how you doing? How are you? And it's intended, it's assumed, the cultural norm is you're not really asking how the person is doing. And also it is socially acceptable for the person being asked to not really answer and to cover it up. And that it's just a formality. But if we think deeper, or we think on a more important level as an individual, as a human being, as someone who is connected into the fabric of relationships in our life, and that it's very important to be asked, how are you? And what I like to follow that up with is, no, really, how are you? We live in a culture, we live in, many of us are surrounded by busyness and distraction, and living in families and in a network of friends of, for many of us, people who aren't connecting. We're together, but we're not together. We're feigning connection, but we're not really connecting. We're not dropping down into, we're not asking the question, no, really, how are you? And the thing about the question is there needs to be a pause and space after the question in order to contain and hold and welcome and invite the answer, and to invite then the ability to come into more fullness, more full revealing of yourself. And it's this revealing quality that we don't have. And then, of course, there's the experience of once you reveal yourself, hopefully that you're with an empathetic witness. You're with a loving witness. You're with someone who's able to see you when you reveal yourself, because you're taking space. You're entering a shared containment of how are you? And then you do this for your friend. It's reciprocal. And you look at no, really, how are you doing? So when we don't have this, there's the immediacy, the obviousness of living in a family or being in a relationship, being married. You could have children yourself. Think of your work, your job environment, and you do some research of just looking around, observing. And are people asking you? Are people stopping? And I don't mean this as the greeting in the definition of the social greeting as a way to facilitate a connection, a very quick, hey, how are you doing? But who do you have in your life who does not look distracted, who's not busy, doing something else, who's not consumed in their own story or narrative, telling you something about something that happened in their life? and unable to disconnect from their own narrative and take a moment to a pause, to pull back, to engage in the pause, to look at you and say, how are you doing? No, really, I want to know. So if you don't have anyone in your life, if you don't have multiple people in your life, this points us towards, this strengthens our own experience of emotional isolation. Now, you might have others who do ask this question, but they themselves don't answer it. They are not necessarily able to hear your answer. There's a vulnerability. If you ask this of another person, there's a strength in vulnerability. There's a willingness to go there. And so if I ask you, how are you doing really? I'm able to sit in the pause and to be present enough and to know that that I'm anticipating the vulnerability of your answer. But in order for me to listen on this level, I need to allow myself to be vulnerable. And the only way I can ask you that question is if I'm able to contemplate and be honest with myself about my own answer of how am I? How am I doing? So if I'm going to ask you and drop into that deeper place of receiving and containing and holding space for each other, to allow the pause, to create the opening, to say, how are you? I also have to be in intimate, vulnerable connection with my own answer to that question. I also cannot answer that question anticipating that it's very quickly going to be my turn and I'm going to share with you my own vulnerability. And then I'm going to frighten the experience or shut down the experience. There's a delicate dance, and perhaps it's not as delicate as it needs to be. This could be a bit more playful and casual and organic. However, we live in a culture that there's all of these obstacles and these layers. Think about your persona. Think about how you present. There are people, perhaps this could be you, this is me. We're living we have a partner relationship, or we're at work, we have work friendships, or we're living in a family. And essentially, we're not revealing ourselves to each other. And we come to a place of realizing that not only are people not asking, how are we doing? And not only are we unable to drop into knowing this for ourselves, but even when we do come into the awareness of how we're doing, we might initiate blurting it out. We might take the risk, be vulnerable, and take the lead of, well, I'm going to share. I don't need the question. I'm not waiting. I'm not waiting for you to ask how I'm doing. I'm just going to tell you. And then over time, if the people that we're in relationship with are unable to wake up to the invitation, to the vulnerability, to the tenderness, to the softness, to it's a form of listening. It's an emotional listening to, oh, this is not just an everyday conversation. This is not just details about a story. This is not just chronology of happenings. This is not just recounting something that happened 5 days ago. Oh, this person in real time, in this moment, there's an activation, there's an aliveness, there's a presence, there's a opening. And our ears prick up, our brain wake like, oh, this is vulnerable sharing and revealing. And there's a delicateness to this. It's like observing, and we don't want to scare the experience away. It's like, coming upon a deer in the woods there's a very carefulness about this. And it's this sensitivity that, one, we just quite frankly need, because the world around us is so antithetical and at times even hostile to hearing or caring about your experience and who you are and what's going on. But if we do this on our own, initiate, we're not waiting for the question, but then we observe over time that in fact, in a way, we're just talking to ourselves. And so I can take the risk. I have the insight, the awareness to know how I'm doing and to question myself. And I want to be vulnerable. I want to reveal myself. And yet when I do, and this is, the phrase, falling on deaf ears, or the phrase, pearls before swine. I mean, this vulnerability, and forgive me, I don't mean to call, your family members, your coworkers or people in your life swine. I'm not, using that as in the judgmental sense, but in the relational sense of it means revealing something that has value, and that it's the people around us are not picking up that there's value in hearing, in dropping into, in feeling what is being shared. The answer to how are you doing? Really, how are you doing? So then this, of course, shuts us down. Or we choose, the better phrase here, the whole point of this video, is that we participate in our own emotional isolation, because over time we question, why bother? Why am I making this effort to, at times, what can feel like bulldozing through, forcing myself onto a situation, revealing myself there's a sense of risk and courage, and it's this carefree vulnerability. But when we're surrounded by people and we're in relationship dynamics that is not valued, and that the others around us are playing it very safe and do not want to reveal how they're doing, over time, it makes sense that we question, well, why in fact am I bothering doing this? And then we can realize that we can operate without revealing ourselves at all. We really can go through the motions. You can be in a family, you can be in a relationship, you can be in a job, you can go to a party and meet people, and you don't have to reveal yourself at all. And we can be the extension of our own persona. We can be the extension of our own presentation. And people are not really going to ask, and it makes us question if they really care. And we're not really going to open up and be vulnerable at this point, because we've tried that. And it still feels isolating to do that when there's not reciprocity, and when there's not a dropping into a shared, contained experience of emotional attunement. And so if we start moving through our life knowing, I don't really have to tell people how I am, and I'm noticing no one's really asking, this is emotional isolation. And so we're not isolated in the fact that, we don't live in a cabin on a mountain where we're bored with ourselves. We're engaged in life. It appears, if you watch the video, there's video of us at the picnic, there's video of us going on vacation, there's video of us running errands with our family or our friends. And we could even go to, this is this is what happens on Facebook when you look at someone's profile and you look at their photos, and they're living the life. And it's this manufactured presentation, that kind of mouth open smiling where your head is back, having fun, look, we're skiing again, woo! And who, when you're skiing, how many times were you able to have a moment of exhale with another person, and where they exhale with you, and that you lock eyes and you lock hearts and you lock into this emotional empathy? And you're able to ask and be asked, how are you doing? Really, how are you doing? Let's break through, let's move beyond this emotional isolation and reveal ourselves. And if we don't do this, we can go months and months and months and months where we're emotionally isolated, and then we go years and years and years. And many of us become so overly focused on the presentation, the outward presentation. We have a sense of knowing that we're hiding. We have a sense of knowing that we're fake. We're a manufactured presentation of how we want people to perceive us, and we don't have to reveal our vulnerability. And some of us have been hurt, very hurt, in the revealing of your vulnerability. So it's not only just a choice around the realization that it's not received, it's even the thought of going to the place of emotional disclosure and emotional vulnerability. To be open on this level invites fear around very realistically, very legitimately being hurt because you have some history of being hurt before. So this is a dilemma. This is an incredible existential dilemma which has a monumental amount of pain. It's a cycling pain, a cyclical pain, something that we're looping in, because we have this double bind around a deep-seated need as a human being to not be the presentation, the extension of our persona, and to hide behind a false self, but to truly be known and to reveal ourselves and say, I do want you to know me, and I want to know you, and to make it a part of our everyday conversation to check in and say, how are you doing? Many of us put the hope and put all of our effort into achieving this with a partner. And we think that, well, that's the one place, that's the one person, that's the one time, the one context where this will all, there'll be some freedom, and I'll be able to be delivered from this emotional isolation. And that, in fact, the whole pursuit, the reason why I'm trying to find a partner, the reason why we're fighting so hard to make a relationship with a partner work, is in hope of having the experience of being known in this way. And when that doesn't work out, or the relationship, there's some limitations, we realize that we look around and in what other venues, what other context, what other relationships is this happening? And for many of us, it's not. It's just quite frankly not. And we're living in emotional isolation. I'm reminded of a poem by T.S. Eliot, The Love Song for J. Alfred Prufrock. And although the poem has a number of layers and at times can be quite dense and difficult to decipher and understand, there's a thread, there's a theme. I do believe that the narrator, I do believe that the poem is capturing this place when we grapple, the consciousness of emotional isolation, where we're living the dilemma, where we want to be known, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want a witness, we want to be held in the emotional space of the pause, where someone actually wants to hear. Like, I really, really, really want to know, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And then it's a transcendent place, because it also goes beyond words. The experience that we're talking about is just not, someone might say, well, how are you doing? And let's say that you don't really have the words, and they go, oh, okay, fine, sure. And they move on. We're talking about this, it's even the place of the unsaid, where we share, we hold the moment, and we can be known through what's not being said and what's not being shared. And again, that's what I mean by this idea of don't frighten the experience away, or when you're in the forest and there's a deer, you don't want to, there's a fragility, there's a carefulness about being available. And when we don't have this, we can notice the layers of the obstacle to achieving it. And over the years, we can see just how incredibly isolated we are and how incredibly distracted we are. And at times it feels like living through glass. You're living through a wall, a plate glass wall. And even if you want to connect with others, it appears that there's not others getting through to you. And if the glass is so well in place, it might that image of seeing other people on the other side of the glass, but you can't even hear each other. You just hear mouths moving. People look like they're talking to you, but it's not, there's not a connection. There's no connection. There's no life. So many of us are going through life without life. We're creating the form and the structure that, the idea, the phrase, a house. You can have a house, but a house is not necessarily a home. And so you can have the structure, you can have the building, you can have the place, that's the house, but the home equals the soul, equals the heart. It's, the idea, the hearth is the heart of the home. And it's the place where there's life and where the family gathers. And it's not so much about the physical building or the physical structure. It's about the life the living that we're doing, or the life that we're living inside that house creates the home. And it's the same thing. We can have friends, we can be married, we can have a job, we can do things on the weekend, we can have connection with other people as far as the form and the structure. And for many of us, that's just the house. It's missing the feeling of home, the feeling of belonging, the feeling, the spirit being breathed into, so that there's a liveliness, and so that we feel like there's a passion and there's an energy and that there's a soul. And so then we're to say, how are you? Really, how are you? It's let's drop into and have a soul conversation, or what's referred to as a heart to heart. Let's really have a heart to heart conversation. And this can shatter the glass. We're not living behind a wall of glass anymore. The sound is not muffled, and we realize we can be heard and someone else can be heard. This is the vision. This is the way out. This is the path out of emotional isolation. And yet for many of us, it's not just you in your head creating this. This also speaks to the values, the skill set, the family system, the environment that you're living in, that we collectively seem to dumb down, disconnect, close off. And in many ways, many of us we're living in a culture of people who have guarded themselves, who cut themselves off, and who are walking around behind a sheet of glass. And we can see each other, and we can smile, we look shiny, we look, well dressed, and we have a nice presentation. We have all these wonderful photos on Facebook that's sharing who we are. But we're emotionally isolated. And this poem, The Love Song for J. Alfred Prufrock by Eliot, he captures in these very ordinary, mundane statements, this might be a little out of context because I'm not going to read the whole poem, but there's this rhythm and there's this cadence about everyday, ordinary life. And while he's constantly questioning his own emotional isolation, and through it he's questioning, who am I? Who am I? and who's engaging me, and I'm noticing other people being engaged, and that it also looks superfluous, and it looks flat, and it looks fake, and it looks empty. And then he has these little moments where he will say, do I dare eat a peach? And that line is thrown in there, do I taste the juiciness of life? How do I possibly break through this emotional isolation, to break through this glass wall and feel some connection with the world, where the world actually cares and wants to know, how am I? Or do I just stay living behind this glass? Do I just stay deprived of eating the sweet, juicy, ripe peach? And he says, do I dare eat a peach? Another line in the poem that he shares is, I've measured out my life in coffee spoons. That's the routine. Every day, 4 scoops of coffee in the coffee filter, same amount of water, press the button, turn it on, make coffee. I measure out my life in coffee spoons. And we're looking at how we get caught in the routine and the ordinary everyday function, and we don't break that up enough where we allow connection to enter, and where we are pulled away from that monotonous, routine, ordinary disconnect, and that life can enter in such a way to even ask you, how are you doing? It's no longer even about a person. We're so shut down, so emotionally isolated, that now we're looking around for life itself to come knocking on the door and say, I'm here, how are you doing? And this is what it means when I say finding ocean. If you go to the ocean and you sit there long enough, or if you go to the mountains and you sit there long enough, and any vast, the majesty of the ocean is calling you to wake up to the present moment, and to be there with yourself, and to really be asked the question, how are you doing? Or you can notice this with babies. I mean, there's something about the beauty and the innocence of an infant child, also with animals. It really pulls us away from the allegiance to, I measure out my life in coffee spoons. There's also the last line, or near the last line of the poem, in the love song for J. Alfred Prufrock, he says, I've heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. To me, there's this resignation and a profound sadness. I've heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I don't think that's an immature sadness. I think that's a mature resignation. And that this idea of the mermaids, this mythical creature, to be touched by the possibility to break free out of this emotional isolation, is as magical as mermaids singing, as mermaids coming to you and altering your life so much that the glass shatters, we wake up, and finally we're being asked in a very meaningful way, how are you doing? Really, how are you doing? And in the poem, and again, this is near the end, so there's a maturing. I don't consider it to be bitter. I don't consider it to be pessimistic. There's a resignation in how he's made a case throughout the whole poem to say, I don't think that they're going to sing to me. I don't think the people around me are going to ask, how am I doing? I don't think people really want to know me on this emotional level. This makes me think about the need, our culture, the celebrity culture, to be famous, to want to be, many people who are hurt, who are struggling, who have depression, who feel so incredibly awkward and disconnected, they fantasize about being famous. And they fantasize, and what, if you really think about that, they fantasize about being known. and being observed. And of course, we're aware that how our culture venerates fame, and that too can be very vapid and very empty, and a lot of smoke and mirrors. But if we separate the execution of what is actually, how it translates, but just look at the goodness of the desire, that there's this part of us that when we are grappling with our emotional isolation, we get the insight and the spark to say, well, I'm going to be famous, or I want to be famous, or we enter the fantasy of being discovered and being loved for just being who you are. And that the idea of fame, particularly in, where it's at today with paparazzi and the incredible, it's the overexposure. It's like I can't hide. It's like trying to so extremely blow out this hiding aspect that, I'll be so under the microscope, I'll be so under the lens. I mean, cameras will be around me all the time, and then I'll be known. Then people are asking me, how am I doing really? And as we know, that's a false setup, because although I have not experienced anything, remotely like that, but hearing other famous people talk about what it's like to be in the paparazzi and to be scrutinized that way, it does not come with a feeling of satisfaction of being known. So it's a kind of false, it's a false promise. So this video is to capture the essence and the feeling of emotional isolation, and that if you've lasted this long in the video, chances are you know what I'm talking about, and that you're feeling this and experiencing it in your family. There's not an easy answer, because I'm moving back and forth between our own internal relationship to shutting down, to revealing our vulnerability, but then also noticing that if we live in an environment, in a culture, and in a family, and with people around us who aren't able to speak the language of revealing themselves so that you can reveal yourself, you're very quickly going to feel like you speak your own language and other people don't understand. And over time, you too might be able to relate to this idea of living behind glass. This is an existential struggle. This is something that we can grapple with, and we shouldn't underestimate its impact on our health, its impact on our quality of life, and very much so, this is what I say, this is the place of addiction. This is the place of depression. This is the place of suicide, because the intensity of grappling with our own consciousness of not being known, not being seen, not being heard, and the great deep desire to want to reveal that and to bump up against any number of limitations that thwart the process. The best we can hope for is like reading a poem. And I like the phrase brief, bright moments. There are openings. There are islands of clarity. There are islands of connection. We can find pockets of people and communities and individual moments where we connect with someone and it surprises us. And it's like back to the Prufrock poem, do I dare eat a peach? One day we go out and in the middle of the day we find that we're eating a peach. Life throws us a peach. Life throws us this circumstance, this situation, and we didn't even see it coming. And when it is here, it is juicy and it is sweet and it is delicious. And it gives us a different framework, a vantage point to step away from this monotony of emotional isolation. And at the same time, there is a very real challenge of, as much as we know that this is a problem or something that we're grappling with, it does not appear to have an easy, quick solution to say, well, let's just not have emotional isolation. We collectively as a culture need to value relationship, and we collectively as a culture needs to value emotional connection, and we need to value being vulnerable and revealing ourselves to want to be known, but then also be less concerned about our own selfish drive so that we can let in other people and find out, well, we really want to know who they are as well. This is a skill. This is a value system. This is a very much a way of being and a way of operating in life and in the world. And it is very true, a commentary at our current state of affairs, of where, for all the different isms, all the different ways that we're disconnected. One way that we're disconnected and we continue to stay disconnected is, quite frankly, not valuing. We just collectively as a people, we say we do, we say that we want to, but we really don't value vulnerable emotional connection, friendship, and openness with other people in a way that's leading from compassion and kindness. And until we value that and the greater system changes along with us, we're going to bump up against our own internal struggle. And we're going to bump up against our own existential pain around our emotional isolation. So this video is an attempt to say, I know, I get it. It's happening, you're living it. And life can be incredibly lonely and can feel very emotionally isolating, like you're on an island, and that you're going to have these moments where you're grappling with this on your own. The intention of this video is at least to begin the conversation and to say that we share that in common, and that you're not the only one who is trying to figure out how to find a place, to find the people who ask you the question, how are you really? I hope that this is helpful. If you like this video, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, to learn more about me and the community membership website that I'm creating, please go to my website, alanrobarge.com, and thank you for watching.